Her feet don't touch the ground anymore, they drag. The soles are gone, shredded against the rocks that line the beach at Phaleron, south of Athens. Her name was Callista. At least, that's what her mother called her 5 days ago, before the dawn came and everything ended. The girl being pulled across the sand doesn't answer to that name now. She doesn't answer to anything. Behind her, 3 Persian soldiers move with the casual efficiency of men who've done this 1,000 times before. They're not hurrying. Why would they? There's nowhere for her to go. Ahead, sprawling across the coastline like a living organism, is a tent city. Thousands of canvas structures, smoke rising between them, flags snapping in the Mediterranean wind. And from inside those tents comes a sound that will haunt the archaeological record for the next 2.5 millennia, screaming, not to clean, sharp screams of battle. These are different. These are the sounds of people realizing their world has ended while they're still breathing. If you're drawn to the darkest truths history tried to bury, the stories that never made it into textbooks, because they were too horrifying for scholars to confront, then you're in the right place. These aren't legends. These aren't exaggerations. These are documented events, pulled from administrative records and military archives, stories that deserve to be remembered precisely because they were designed to be forgotten. The year is 479 BCE. Callista doesn't know this. She doesn't know about the great battles, the names that will echo through history, the triumph of Greek civilization that poets will sing about for centuries. She only knows that 5 days ago, men with curved swords came to her village in Boeotia. They came at dawn. Her father tried to fight. He lasted maybe 8 seconds. Her mother ran toward the hills, carrying Callista's younger brother, but he was always slow, always falling behind. The soldiers brought him back. They did things to him that no 12-year-old should ever witness. Things that would define what it meant to survive in ways the history books would never acknowledge. By nightfall, the village was burning. The soldiers organized the survivors with the precision of accountants: age, gender, health. They had categories. They had quotas. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't the random violence of conquest. This was logistics. This was empire operating at an industrial scale, and what it was processing wasn't goods or supplies. It was people. It was daughters. It was the future itself. What happened to Callista and more than 40,000 women like her wasn't recorded in the triumphant histories. When Herodotus sat down to write about the Persian Wars, to chronicle the great conflict that would define Western civilization, he gave them one sentence, one single line. Many Greeks were taken, some were sold into servitude, and then he moved on. He moved on to discuss military formations, to celebrate victories, to carve the narrative that would echo through every history classroom for the next 2,500 years. The statues Greece erected after their victories at Salamis and Plataea don't commemorate Callista. They commemorate men who died gloriously in battle. Warriors whose names were carved into marble and chanted in amphitheaters. The saviors of democracy, the defenders of freedom, the heroes who would inspire generations. But Callista's name wasn't carved anywhere. What was done to her was systematized, documented, Persian administrative tablets, buried under the ruins of Persepolis and translated from cuneiform into Greek into English, reveal a system so calculated, so brutally efficient, that calling it mere enslavement misses the entire point. The Persian Empire under Xerxes didn't just want to conquer Greece. It wanted to consume it, to digest it from the inside out. To take your daughters and make them forget your language. To raise your grandsons in positions of power serving a foreign king. To erase bloodlines and replace them with something new, something Persian, something that owed nothing to the mothers who birthed them. This is the strategy no epic poem will ever celebrate. This is the cost of victory that Greece never wanted to acknowledge, because it's much easier to build monuments to triumph when you do and have to look at what it cost, when you don't have to face the systematic erasure of an entire generation. But what happened on those beaches wasn't random violence, it was something far worse. To understand the true horror of what Xerxes orchestrated, We need to go back to that summer of 479 BCE, to the processing centers at Phaleron, where something unprecedented in the ancient world was taking place, where human beings were being transformed into raw material for an empire's machinery, and where the fate of thousands of girls like Callista was being decided not by passion or cruelty, but by bureaucrats with clipboards, calculating the most efficient way to erase a people. Let me take you to Phaleron in the summer of 479 BCE. The Persian Wars are ending, but not the way Xerxes had planned. His fleet lies at the bottom of the sea off Salamis. His army has been shattered at Plataea. Everything that should have led to Greek submission has instead led to Greek survival. The historians will write about this for centuries. Themistocles, Leonidas, names that will become immortal. But while generals celebrate in marble temples, while sculptors begin planning monuments to Greek glory, something else is happening on the beaches. There's a man there overseeing an operation so systematic, so divorced from the chaos of warfare, that soldiers who witness it describe it like watching accountants at work. His name changes depending on which record you read. Mardonius, Artabazos, the identity doesn't matter. What matters is the system he represents. The Persians haven't just brought soldiers to Greece. They've brought administrators, bureaucrats, slavers who understand that killing everyone would be simple, even merciful, compared to what they actually intend to do. They have tablets, scribes, quotas, targets, contingency plans for their contingency plans. The beaches at Phaleron aren't battlefields, they're processing centers. Industrial facilities designed to efficiently separate, categorize, and redistribute human beings. The word the Persians use is baron. It means the taking of yield, like harvest time, like gathering grain. Your wheat being cut down, bundled, and shipped somewhere else. The survivors who haven't fled into the mountains, those too old or too young or too loyal to their families to run, are brought here in columns. Thousands of them. Men, women, children. They arrive in the morning, and by evening they're processed, separated, categorized. The records are clear on this. They're sorted by age first. Under 12, you go to one sector. 12 to 30, different sector. Over 30, the labor camps in Thrace, where life expectancy is measured in seasons, not years. They're processing you, deciding your fate based on calculations that have nothing to do with who you are, everything to do with what you can become, what value you represent to the empire. The young girls receive special attention. This is documented in Persian administrative records, not propaganda, actual ledgers, tabs and columns tracking inventory. The language is dry, bureaucratic, which makes it infinitely worse because it means this isn't the depraved passion of individual soldiers. This is policy. This is institutional. This is empire at its most rational and therefore most dangerous. Someone sat in a room and planned this. Someone calculated how to maximize the extraction of human beings. Someone wrote it down and filed it away. The system is called the harem. Later, this word will acquire meanings related to royal palace quarters, the spaces reserved for the king's family, but that's not what it means originally. The harem is the administrative apparatus, the assimilation network, the machine that will take Greek women and transform them into Persian subjects, into mothers of Persian children, into the cultural glue that will bind the next generation to Persia rather than to the lands of their mothers. It's bureaucratic colonialism at its most sophisticated. The power not just to conquer land, but to rewrite the bloodlines that will inherit it. If you're still watching this, if you're the kind of person who needs to understand the darkest truths history tried to erase, then I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button, because this channel exists to tell the stories that textbooks skip over. The accounts buried in administrative records instead of immortalized in marble. These forgotten voices deserve to be heard, and I need your help to make sure they are. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I genuinely want to know what compels someone to seek truth when the truth is this dark. A girl named Sophia. We know her name because a pottery shard was found in Eretria with her name scratched into it. She was 14. The Persians took her to a facility in Sardis. Not to kill her, not to torture her for information. What information would a 14-year-old have? They took her because she was young enough to learn, young enough to be molded, young enough that her entire sense of self could be rewritten. The Persian system works like this. Take the daughters, separate them from their mothers long enough that the separation becomes permanent. Teach them Persian, make them forget Greek the way you forget a dream. Place them into households, into families, sometimes into quarters serving the royal administration. Give them Persian names. Erase their birth names as completely as possible. Surround them with Persian children, Persian servants, Persian culture. Feed them Persian food. Tell them Persian stories. Make them pray to Persian gods. Let them bear children. Encourage it. Facilitate it. Make it part of the system. And watch those children grow up speaking Persian as their first language, with only the vaguest sense that their mother once knew something called Greek. Those children will govern territories their mothers once called home. They'll serve an empire their mothers died resisting. They'll make policy, command soldiers, establish dynasties. They'll be fully, completely Persian, and they won't even know what was taken from them. They'll have no memory of loss because they'll have no baseline to compare their lives to. The conquest will be so complete it becomes invisible. The numbers in the administrative tablets suggest somewhere between 30,000 and 50,000 Greek women and girls were absorbed into the Persian system. Some went to Sardis, some to Susa, some disappeared into bureaucratic machinery in Babylon and Ecbatana. Some were distributed to Persian nobles as gifts, investments, and loyalty. Most would never be heard from again. Think about what that number means. That's not a statistic. That's a generation. An entire cohort of Greek females, removed from Greek society, integrated into Persian society, set up to produce the next generation of mixed-blood administrators who would have no memory of Greece, no loyalty to Greece, no connection to Greece except the blood running through their veins. Some historians have tried to minimize this. They've called it exaggeration, said the numbers are inflated. But even the lowest estimates suggest 15,000 to 25,000 women systematically removed from their homes. That's not exaggeration. That's demographic catastrophe. That's cultural erasure on an unprecedented scale. Here's what the history books call this: enslavement. Here's what the administrative records actually show: cultural erasure operating at an industrial level. This wasn't about labor. This wasn't about extracting work. This was about replacing a people with a new people that looked like them but thought like Persians. The Persians understood something most conquerors didn't. You can slaughter a people, burn their cities, destroy their temples, salt their fields, but they'll tell stories about you. They'll make you the villain in their mythology. A slaughtered people become martyrs, heroes of their own tragic narrative. They inspire resistance, revenge, future rebellions. But if you take their daughters, if you raise their grandsons as Persian, if you make the next generation forget there was ever another home, if you do it systematically enough that it seems like natural evolution rather than conquest, then you've won in a way that's almost perfect, because nobody even realizes they've been defeated. A woman named Harmonia returned to Eretria around 460 BCE after 12 years in Persian captivity. 12 years. Think about that. A girl becomes a woman becomes a mother. She was 28 when she came back. She had a child with her, a boy, maybe 6 years old, half Persian, half Greek. She'd probably born him in Susa or Sardis, nursed him while learning Persian songs, watched him grow up speaking Persian before Greek, if he knew Greek at all. She probably loved him. She probably also knew he was evidence of what had been done to her. The city of Eretria looked at her and saw contamination. That's what the public records say, exactly that word. Contaminated by barbarian touch. Her family, which had probably searched for her for 12 years, looked at her and saw shame. The city refused to recognize her citizenship. Her family refused to take her in. They refuse to recognize the child as Greek. The records end there. We don't know what happened to Harmonia and her son. Maybe she disappeared into the countryside, built a small life where nobody knew her story. Maybe the child grew up thinking he was simply Greek. Maybe she never told him. Maybe she died before she could. The silence is the point. The silence is the victory the Persians had already won. They didn't just take her from Greece. They made sure that, when she came back, Greece rejected her. They broke her twice, once by taking her, once by refusing her return. This is the part of history that gets erased first. Not because people don't know it happened, but because people don't want to admit it happened. Greece won the wars. Athens became the birthplace of democracy. The philosophers shaped Western thought for millennia. The sculptors created marble we still admire. And all of that happened while thousands of Greek women were being systematically removed from existence. While their daughters forgot Greek, while their grandsons were raised Persian, while the culture itself was being replaced from the inside. The historian Theopompus wrote about them only once, calling them the silent women, Greek survivors of Persian captivity who lived on the margins of society, unable to reintegrate, unable to speak of what had been done to them, unable to be heard even when they did speak. He wrote something that haunts scholars. They are like shadows. They move through the agora, but no one sees them. They were taken, and though they returned, they are still gone, living ghosts, existing in their home cities but not of them anymore. Too changed, too marked, too much a reminder of an erasure nobody wanted to discuss. They were allowed to exist in physical space, but erased from social space. Invisible while visible, forgotten while alive. And then, over time, Greece stopped calling them anything at all. By the time Herodotus was writing his histories just decades later, the focus was entirely on battles, strategies, Greek glory. Marathon, Salamis, Plataea, the Persian captives were a single line. One sentence in thousands of pages. One sentence to erase thousands of women. One sentence to dismiss the most comprehensive cultural conquest of the ancient world, but the graves don't lie. Archaeologists working across Greece have found burial sites from the mid-5th century BCE containing women's remains with unusual characteristics. Signs of malnutrition consistent with long-term captivity. Skeletal markers suggesting years of forced labor. Isotope analysis showing these women lived far from their birthplaces before returning. The bones remember what the histories forgot. The graves hold the truth that marble monuments obscure. These women existed, they suffered, they survived. And then they were erased twice, once by the empire that took them, and once by the civilization that refused to acknowledge what had been lost. When we talk about the Persian Wars, we talk about Greek victory, about the triumph of democracy, about the beginning of Western civilization. We don't talk about the 40,000 daughters who paid the price. We don't talk about the generation that was systematically removed and replaced. We don't talk about the conquest that succeeded precisely because it looked like failure. Callista, the 12-year-old girl we met at the beginning, her fate is unknown, but we know the fate of thousands like her. Absorbed into an empire that understood conquest wasn't just about territory, it was about erasing the future itself. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about this. How do we remember the people history deliberately forgot? How do we honor the suffering that empires tried to erase? Because that's the question we're left with. Not whether Greece won the wars, they did. But whether they understood what they'd lost, whether we understand what they lost, and whether, 2,500 years later, we're willing to look at what victory actually cost. The silent women of the Persian Wars didn't get monuments, they didn't get epic poems. They got one sentence in Herodotus, and then they got forgotten, but their story matters. Because it shows us what conquest really looks like when it succeeds. Not the clean lines on a map, not the dates in a textbook, but the systematic erasure of people, carried out with clipboards and quotas and bureaucratic efficiency. That's the horror historians tried to bury. That's the truth that deserves to be remembered.